At the highest level, really strong players are always trying to look to set up a pawn chain which works well with the rest of their pieces. And I think that's the type of thing you should be trying to emulate in your own games. Don't ignore the pawns. Try to make them work with your pieces so that you have a coordinated position, a coordinated army. The next game is an absolute chess classic. It could be used as a textbook lesson on how to create a favourable pawn chain and how to control the position through domination of an open file. It's also a textbook lesson on how to handle a position where you've got more space, where the enemy is cramped. It's a game between Anatoly Karpov and Wolfgang Unzicker, and it was played in the Nice Olympiad back in 1974. It really is an object lesson in how to play a position where you've got more space and a favourable pawn chain as white. The opening was a Ruy Lopez, with Karpov playing the main line and Unzicker responding with the closed variation. Black plays b5 and follows up with d6. The Marshall Gambit complex of systems starts with castles here, and then black will follow up with the freeing break d5. But that produces the type of game which is far removed from the closed variation, where black just plays the solid d6. White plays c3. That is thematic in the Ruy Lopez. White's thinking about building a centre with d4. Black castles, and now h3. Many games have seen white play d4 straight away. In that case, black gets slightly more freedom in the position by pinning the knight on f3 and putting some pressure on d4. So white plays h3 first. Part of his general policy of constriction, followed by a kingside attack. Knight a5 by black. Literally, this move has been played thousands of times. And now bishop retreats c5, the Chigorin system. Black puts his queen on c7. Strong pointing e5, and hopes to maintain a solid game. This is not a particularly ambitious system as black, but it's proved quite efficient and difficult to crack over the years. So white plays knight bd2. Black brings his knight back to c6. And now Karpov makes the first fundamental decision of the game by blocking the centre. You don't need to do that with white. You can of course play a move like knight f1, or you may also take on c5 in this position, hoping to be able to use the d5 square for one of your knights as the game progresses. But d5 is fundamental. It gains space, it drives black backwards, and now white starts to put on a bit of pressure with a4. Black plays rook b8 because white was already threatening to take on b5. That's the move which makes least concessions. White opens the a file and now blocks the position well. Tries to block the position on the queen side by playing b4. Basically, Karpov's idea is to block the queen side and then go over to a kingside attack. So what black mustn't do at this early stage is start making moves like c4, because that gives white just a free hand in the position. I suppose white could start with knight f1 here, and then he's got a choice of plans. He can either play for domination on the a file, or as I say, he can play for a typical Lopez kingside attack, starting with moves such as g4, knight g3, etc. So Unzicker tries to keep things as flexible as possible on the queen side, and he just moves his knight to b7. But that's not a great square for the knight. All it does is to protect the c5 pawn, but apart from that, it's very passive. And note, after that, it's very difficult for black to contest the a file, as we will see. So Unzicker carries on developing, very solid, and now he makes an attempt to contest the a file. Queen to d2. Black plays rook f to c8, and now bishop d3. Just taking away some of black's tactics. g6. What does that do? Well, later on, and the position is very slow moving, perhaps black hopes to get in f5. He also keeps a white knight out of f5. One idea in the Lopez is to move this knight up to g3 and then hopefully in one day to f5. So black just cuts that out. White continues to maneuver, black likewise, and now rook a2. This is the first sign that Karpov has ambitions on the queen side. He wants to double up his rooks and put his rook on a7, which he hopes is going to tie black up. c4. Well, I'm not sure that black should have done that, but it's getting hard to suggest advice because black is so cramped. White has more choice of plans, and so Unzicker gets a little bit impatient here, and he plays c4. Perhaps his intention was something like this: bishop b1, queen d8, and he thinks, okay, I'm going to take on a2 and then play rook a8. This should be okay for me. Not after the next move, the brilliant bishop a7. And that is a very easy move to overlook. The pawns are all fixed. Black's counterplay is limited. The bishop comes in to block the file, which gives white time to mass his major pieces in the a file, and then eventually this will lead to control of that file. As black is so passive, he can't really do much against this plan. So Karpov just goes through with it. There we see doubling the pawns, that bishop on a7, throttling the black rook on a8. Again, black can do absolutely nothing. So white continues unhurriedly to maneuver his pieces into better and better positions. Bishop g7, and now f4. Classic chess strategy. White opens up a second front with black very passive. The idea is black's got to keep all his pieces on the queen side to defend there, so white opens up the king side. f6. Well, when you're confronted with a great player like Karpov, who is obviously playing a strategical masterpiece here, it's difficult to remain objective. But f6, again, is a very passive move. I suppose Unzicker was a bit afraid about opening it up. Something like this. But maybe black can defend this position. Okay, he has to cede the two bishops here. But maybe black can hang on. Actually, looking at it here, I can see now that this bishop could become very strong. Maybe just retreating is a good idea, with the idea of bishop g5. You know, white is keeping quite a big edge in this position, although whether it's winning or not is another matter. Big advantage to white, but not winning. I think that's the correct assessment of this position. But after f6, and now f5 by Karpov, very good, the position becomes blocked. But this is much worse for black than the one we just described, the position we just described, because white is now able to, again, continue to maneuver, and black is completely tied up. Penetration on h5 is going to follow, and we will see that this makes an enormous difference. Well, in block positions, good and bad pieces come to the fore. Look at this black bishop here. We can definitely think that is his bad bishop locked in behind the pawns. White moves in with his own bad bishop, the central pawns locked on white squares, to exchange it off for black's good bishop. So this is a very favourable trade from white's perspective. But Karpov does everything on his own terms in this game. And again, he continues to manoeuvre, continuing the torture. Black can do nothing. And now the nice move, knight to g4. Based on the tactic, bishop takes h5. Knight takes h5. Queen takes h5. And now knight takes f6 check. Winning black's queen. It is incredibly noticeable how black can do absolutely nothing. That bishop on a7 is paralysing his rooks. So knight to e3, king to g8. Eventually the light square bishops come off the board. In comes the white queen. Black continues to tread water. What else can he do? Queen comes into g6. King f8. And knight h5. Completing black's misery. Unzicker resigned. Just dropping back to queen g6. If black tries to trade the queens, then the white knights have an absolute field day here. And then rook a5. There we see that the control of the a file really did mean something. The pawn on b5 is attacked, and if black defends with his knight, white just goes bishop b6. And I think that wins a clear pawn. Note that at any stage this knight is ready to hop into f5 with complete control. So just going back to the game itself and looking at the final position, as you can see, black is totally paralysed. He can take the queens off again, but the same idea applies, I think. White's going to put his bishop on b6 and go after that pawn at b5. he's also thinking about knight f5. Black has no active moves. So that was a masterclass really in how to construct a favourable pawn chain and then to follow through with brilliant manoeuvres leading to a textbook defeat by Karpov.